Welcome to Voices in Value-Based Care. I'm Beth Houck. Thanks for tuning in. The movement to value-based care is revolutionizing how healthcare providers get reimbursed for delivery of care. In this program, we're going to explore stories from the field about how real organizations are dealing with this change. You can follow the show on Twitter at #VoicesInVBC. Today's show is a bit of a special one. First, it's going to be the first time I've had 3 guests on my show at the same time, so that'll be fun. And second, this is going to be my last show as host. So the show continues on. So today I'm handing over the reins to my former colleague, Matt Fusan. Matt, welcome again to the show.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate it. Always fun to rejoin you here.
Well, it was about 8 months ago. I looked it up to see when you were last on the show, and we were discussing changes with the 2019 MIPS rule. One of the things that you said during that show was that the program was maturing and that we're looking at more forward-looking signals from CMS. Would you agree?
Yes and no. Of course, that's the answer you're always looking for, right? So since then, we got settled in and we were all cranking forward on 2019. And as you know, just about a month ago, the 2020 proposed rule came out. And for the most part, continued down that path of maturity. We're not seeing huge changes in the categories like we had seen in previous years. The things that were expected continued forward, such as cost category continued to expand, not just in the percentage of the overall score, but also with the addition of more episode-based cost measures. We're seeing a little bit of change in the improvement activities category to make that a little bit more challenging. So in the past, you only had to have one clinician do all of the activities and you got credit. Now you need to have at least 50% of your clinicians do the activity. So an operational level change there that'll make that a little bit more difficult. But for the most part, continued down the path that was expected. Where they threw us the curveball was with something they introduced brand new, which is called MIPS Value Pathways, or as you'll see them referred to and hear us talk about them, MVPs. And that is a brand new concept. It has no impact on 2020. They're collecting information back, and in the proposed rule, there's over 10 pages of questions that CMS is looking for comments on. This would potentially take effect in 2021, and it creates some interesting changes to how MIPS will be administered. The ultimate goal is to continue to help with clinician burnout, but more importantly, to gather data that can be leveraged for beneficiaries to make choices. So right now, they're getting a lot of data, but it's not really easy for somebody to interpret that data and say, oh, I should go to clinician A instead of clinician B. And this MIPS Value Pathways is intended to help with that. It's only proposed for 2021. They have a lot to implement and a lot of details to get through. I'd be a little bit surprised at this point if it actually happens in 2021, but something to keep our eye on. So just when we think we're settling in with CMS, they like to throw a curveball.
You gotta love when a new acronym is introduced to the healthcare world. MVP? There we go.
MVP, so, yes. We certainly don't have enough of them.
So I kind of teased it at the beginning by saying this is my last show as host and that I'm going to be handing over the reins to you. I think it's worth telling the audience a little bit about why that's the case, what the big change is with SA Ignite and your role in that new change.
Absolutely. Thanks. And first, big shoes to fill. So for all the listeners out there, I am taking all the mentoring from Beth that I can get. So very excited about leading this moving forward. Obviously, we've had a lot of conversation with Beth over the years about it, and very excited to be the host moving forward. So in July, the exciting news is that SA Ignite merged with SPH Analytics. We were acquired and we've become part of their population health business unit. SPH Analytics is a company that's been around in multiple forms for about 35 years in the healthcare space, provides solutions to the entire breadth provider and payer space. But from a SA Ignite perspective, we are super excited because this allows us to do more things and bring more solutions to our customer base, as well as share our expertise in MIPS and our products and our value-based care expertise with the existing SPH customer base. So very excited to dig into more of that in the future.
That really is exciting. So for those of you that haven't followed me on LinkedIn or seen some of the Twitter feeds that kind of came out when all of this change was announced, I'm moving over to a company called Sonar MD. I get to spend some time implementing a value-based care solution for payers and providers. Really excited to see what this looks like in the field. So the concept of being able to see how that actually plays out is an exciting new challenge for me. So I'm looking forward to it.
And I can't wait to have you back as a featured guest after you get involved there and tell us what you've learned. And who knows, you're a star, so we might have to have you as a featured guest on a regular basis. The crowds demand it.
I love it. So I did mention that two other people on this call with us, Tom Lee, who has been on the show before. He was the founder of SA Ignite. And I also have with us Amy Amick, the CEO of SPH Analytics. So Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Interestingly, and really quite coincidentally, SA Ignite celebrated its 10-year anniversary almost at the exact same time that this big change for SA Ignite happened. We would reflect anyway, but what would you say when you think back on all those years and how it led to this combination of companies? What do you think? Like when you think back on it, how do you explain it?
Yeah, well, it's been a great learning journey. And when I think back to, Beth, when you and I were wrestling in the trenches of early days of meaningful use and seeing that, okay, to begin with, there was certainly going to be a lot of measurement of clinicians going forward, initially from a process point of view, which is what the early days of meaningful use really represented. And then as we've seen over the years, really evolving more and more to measurement for outcomes tied to increasing financial impact, for providers. Just if you look at the last couple of years, clearly the amount of financial risk has increased, the complexity and the number of programs have also increased. And, really where the opportunity came to really look at combining with an organization like SPH Analytics, we really saw there was great potential. We've clearly heard from our customer base over and over that they really would benefit from having an even broader set of solutions more quickly. And so far in my travels with Amy, whom everyone will meet in a moment, it's really been validating our hypothesis that this combination between the two organizations really makes a lot of sense. And we're really seeing that truly that 1 + 1 is much greater than 2 in terms of what we can now offer. There's great alignment in the cultures, between the cultures of the two organizations, and things are going very well. I'm looking forward to continuing to support the team here on an advising basis, really help to, again, bring more and more value to our mutual customer bases. I can hand over to Amy right now, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm the new kid to the podcast, but I certainly have been around the industry for quite some time. I am very excited to get to join the conversation today, and more broadly, I'm very excited about the opportunity to bring SA Ignite into the SPH family. If I step back and maybe just give a little bit of a context on why SPH so aggressively pursued this acquisition and why we're really interested in what we can do together. I think it's helpful to understanding the story of the histories, but I think it also is a really great representation of how we see the market. And so whether you are a provider, whether you're a payer, whomever you might be in the health system ecosystem, you're trying to figure out how to provide the best care, you're trying to figure out how to provide the best cost and financial equation to how you provide that great care, and you're trying to engage and drive great experience for the patients that you serve. And while you're doing that episodically, the reality is the world is shifting, and it is more valuable and more important than just to treat a person episodically. It is so mission critical to think about a person longitudinally across their entire life, across their entire healthcare journey. And so there's been this recent advent in the last handful of years of population health being a hot spot and really this shift to thinking longitudinally across a person, across classes of people and different groups. At the same time, you've got this shift from fee for service as a reimbursement model to fee for value. And providers and payers are trying to figure out how to provide the best care and the best experience, and also do it in an economic model that's shifting from rewarding for volume to rewarding for health value outcomes. So SBH plays in that broader world where we're trying to help payers and providers navigate through the changes and the opportunity to best serve the people they serve by thinking more longitudinally. And so we've got a division of our company that's very focused on population health. And philosophically, we think it is so important to not think episodically, not to think one step at a time, not to think about one program at a time, but really try to think holistically about cost and about quality. As you get to know SPH Analytics, you'll see that we've got a really nice, robust portfolio that includes how do you measure quality measures, whether those are HEDIS, whether those are custom measures, whether it's MIPS, whatever program it might be, but how do you baseline and measure quality? How do you think about improving quality along the journey? How do you think about patient registries and population more broadly? So how do you think about cost management, utilization metrics, all of those different things that help one succeed in pop health? Philosophically, we absolutely believe that the way a provider will best perform, both in taking care of an individual patient as well as a population, is by thinking holistically. So the SPH mindset is how do we continue to build, buy, or partner to build a broader set of capabilities to really be able to serve as our clients as a holistic partner to help them manage the quality journey and help them manage the population health of the patients they serve. And so when we were introduced to SA Ignite earlier this year, and by the way, we know them because SPH has historically played in the MIPS market as one of our markets, and we've known them as a competitor. But as we had the opportunity to get them to know them more closely this year, we were super impressed, Tom and Matt and Beth, as we saw how not just finite you are in the ability to calculate and measure MIPS, but how you have created amazing both service capabilities as well as technology enablement of your products that allow you to really not just measure, but help somebody figure out what and how that they can take action in order to drive a higher quality of care. And we loved that. And we were super excited. Bringing you into the fold just expands the breadth of what we are able to offer. And when we think about what is best for providers, we think it's being able to have a technology partner that meets them in their moment of need. There's lots to talk about, so maybe we talk about in a bit how the moment of need's changing. The MIPS program looks like this one year and it looks like that the next year. And holy cow, this is happening with HEDIS measures and this is happening with this dynamic in my market. And so, the reality is things are changing fast for provider organizations and we're really working to make sure that we are able to longitudinally support across the breadth of population health, as well as realizing that providers don't get the luxury of playing in a stagnant industry. It's changing every day, and we're trying to make sure that we're able to support them. A long way of introduction. Tom, we're so grateful for the company that you've built and the great work that Matt and Beth and others have put into growing it, and really excited to have you guys part of the broader SPH family now.
Amy, likewise, we're excited too.
Thank you so much for the great overview. You hinted at it when you were talking that there are just so many different things changing in the landscape that really impact what our customers have to manage. One of the things that you and I were not so long ago chatting about was just all the changes in the ACO landscape. What kinds of things are you seeing, Amy?
Oh, wow. It is a dynamic environment, and it continues to be. So what am I seeing? I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm always surprised by how often I see a provider enter an ACO and then a year or two or three later exit an ACO. But the movement in and out of ACOs and providers trying to figure out how they can best support the health of their practice, and is it in an ACO or not, and what's the right ACO to be in. So I guess first observation would be it's a shifting landscape, and providers are leveraging them and sometimes exiting them, trying to figure out how to get the best result for their practice. I'd say that as I think specifically about success in ACOs, I think that the ACOs that I see the greatest success in are the ones that have invested really heavily in making sure that there's clarity in what the mission and intent is, clear alignment across the different players who participate in the ACO, and have a governance structure that provides great governance, but is nimble to how dynamic and changing the needs are in the market. And so I think as one considers going into an ACO, I think there's more to it than just this is the easiest one because it's closely affiliated. I think my coaching to providers would be really thinking about what you're looking to accomplish through the ACO, and also trying to pressure test that ACO's ability to be nimble. I mean, the reality is that the measures we calculate, the bars for quality, how cost is measured, all of them are shifting constantly. I'd encourage people to think hard about selecting ACOs that have the infrastructure and the nimbleness to really work in what is a dynamic and constantly changing environment, and a governance that supports that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's remarkable how much of the in and out we've seen. And I do think that with all of the investment you would imagine places put into it, that movement seems unusual. Yet I think perhaps some are discovering that they entered the wrong one that didn't have some of the characteristics you're talking about.
Let me just add on to that. So you join an ACO to win, right? You join an ACO because you think you can better serve your practice and your patients under the construct of that ACO. And they're hard and difficult to create and manage. And there are so many factors that change every day in what you need to be successful. So I get it, and I probably will stop being surprised when I see folks exit ACOs.
So Tom, I was starting to cue you up either to comment on what Amy said, but also you and I have talked about CPC Plus, so that's changed a bit in the market as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing?
Really, just to add on to what Amy said as a general comment, and then moving over to the CPC Plus, is that in addition to the ever-shifting nature of these programs and the increasing number of them, it's all against the backdrop of increasing physician-clinician burnout. And so another critical success factor for a lot of ACOs and other such organizations and different programs is how do they properly insulate clinicians from a lot of that change while still driving them towards the goals that they must reach in order to be financially sustainable and to be competitive, in this new world. The CPC, kind of how that sort of relates actually to the CPC Plus program, is really on the tail of a number of years of experience that CMS has had running CPC Plus as well as its predecessor CPCI. Now really seeing that CPC Plus in a way is going mainstream with the new voluntary payment model, the primary care first model, which essentially is almost doubling the number of states in which CPC Plus like payment mechanisms are going to be applicable to, and really inheriting a lot of the same quality measures, and with, I would say, an even higher reward, but also higher risk payment structure. And that model also will be pulling in more payers outside of CMS, really looking at more of an all-payer approach in more and more of these states. Connecting off of what Amy said is that that's going to create even more complexity, but also greater opportunity to compete and really win and get what could be up to 50% more reimbursement from CMS under that program.
Matt, now you get to bring us home. So we've talked about a couple different of these models. We've talked on this program and both organizations quite a bit about how you manage multiple value-based care models. What are your thoughts there?
So I think the reality is, as we see the MSSP program convert into Pathways to Success, as Tom just mentioned, CPC Plus growing into a new model, a different type of model, some similarities there. We're currently working right now with a customer in North Carolina that is working on a North Carolina Medicaid program, and North Carolina has created their own, basically a version of CPC Plus. And we don't think that's going to change because the holy grail model that everybody's searching for has not been found yet. Quite frankly, I don't think that there ever will be a holy grail model. So we should expect evolution and change, especially as technology continues to enable. And once we finally get to the point of interoperability, we'll see yet new models. So there's kind of two basic things to focus on, I believe. One, the fundamentals. The fundamentals of the way you deliver care, the way you model your organization, the culture, etc. Build that out, and if you do that, then you're going to be successful in whichever model comes your way next, or especially on the commercial side, when you're choosing and negotiating which models you're going to participate in. So work on getting the fundamentals in place. And, Beth, as we've always talked about with MIPS, it's a great place to start that. It's a great place to figure out how to build an organization that can be successful in value-based care models. And the second is looking at it as a portfolio, no longer a silo. We're in the ACO and we got some people working on that. We're in CPC Plus, we got a different group of people working on that. Really needs to be an enterprise-wide or company-wide or organization-wide view of here's our landscape. How are we going to be successful across this portfolio, and not look at things as individual programs.
So when I've had my guests on, it frequently makes sense for me at the end to ask that expert to provide advice to the audience. I'm going to start with you, Tom. What would you tell a physician practice to do more of and to do less of?
In terms of doing more of, something that really is a never-ending journey is just to make better and better use of data, and to continually improve the quality of that data, because in light of dynamics such as rising clinician burnout and all of these programs and higher risk happening, the one thing that clinicians can generally still rally around is real data that they believe in. There's a lot of challenges to be overcome there. I mean, certainly we're here to help with a big part of that in terms of what we can provide, but that would be the number one thing, is to look more towards data governance and more towards really figuring out what's the best combination of intelligence that can be really extracted from data that's going to really further the goals of the organization. That would be, I think, to me, the number one to do. And I think, did you ask about the thing not to do?
I did. I said do less of.
I think it's trying to bet long-term on the fee-for-service model, even in this day and age, is still surprisingly prevalent. We see, it's like, okay, I'm going to, as a doc, I'll be retired by then. That sort of mindset. You always have that, but in terms of the leadership of such an organization, that's obviously a very dangerous mindset, even for organizations that are in primarily fee-for-service regions that may, at least for now, have a dominant market share. We're just seeing that that's getting eaten away, in many places across the country. And I would say, don't bet against the wave of value-based payment, even if it doesn't seem like it's going to be in the next 6 months for you as an organization. Just take a higher look around and a little bit farther out, and you'll really see that it's coming.
Amy, same question, but now from the perspective of a health system. What would you tell them to do more of, and what would you tell them to do less of?
Great question. So this is going to sound like a softball answer, and it's not intended to be. So what's one of the most important devices that we use in medicine? It's a microscope, right? And what does a microscope let you do? It lets you get closer and closer and closer to what something is, so you can see it at more and more finite levels, right? You're zooming in like crazy. I don't have a great analogy here. I don't know the opposite of a microscope in the healthcare domain, but maybe just from a device, an opposite of a microscope, maybe you could say is a telescope, what does that let you do? It lets you see way, way, way far away, way bigger picture, way broader. And so my advice to a health system, whether they're thinking about inpatient, outpatient, crosses between venues of care, wherever that is, there's so many important and big decisions to make, and it's really, really easy to function on a level. Let's go figure out who our MIPS vendor is at a super focused, detailed, high-powered microscopic level. Or let's go figure out what our X is in a super, zoomed out, broad way. Right there, like this level of depth that you go, or how zoomed in or out you are. There's tremendous latitude for a health system to think about business decisions way zoomed in or way zoomed out. And my advice would be, try to look at big decisions at all different levels of zooming in or out, because a great answer at a zoomed in level might not be the right level might not be the right answer at another level. And so I just would, I guess, offer advice to think on multiple dimensions, because I think some of the movement we see in programs and some of the movements we have where an organization tries to jump on driving X to drive higher quality or whatnot, it makes sense when you're looking on a certain Zoom level, but maybe if you paused and thought about thinking of it on a different Zoom level, you might have been able to have a straighter path to where you want to go.
I like the microscope concept, especially since we're talking about healthcare too. And last but not least, Matt, wind us up and just tell the audience what you would tell CMS. Please, CMS, do more of this and less of it.
So I'll kind of have a combined answer on that one. Everybody you talk to out in the field is customers and organizations, and it shows and everything else, is really change fatigue. CMS, with so many different programs coming out, and each program, and understandably, has a massive amount of regulation behind it and a massive amount of roles. And because of the complexity of the system that has to be there, the challenge is, especially if you're in a multi-specialty organization or health system, is it becomes overwhelming. There's just so much, and there's so much overlap that it is really difficult for people to settle in and try to be successful in these models. And then before you know it, the model changes. So what happens is you start getting fatigue in the market and seeing, I'm just going to wait for the next change. I'm not going to jump on this one. I'm just going to keep going. And I think partially feeds the challenge that Tom spoke about with kind of, I'm just going to ride fee for service. And some of that is because the concern of, I'm going to invest a lot of money on a model, and in 2 years, they're going to change the rules of the model. And who knows, maybe 50% of my time and dollar investment now just went up in smoke. So solidify models, let them operate. I know there's a challenge with having enough advanced alternative payment models out there for clinicians to really participate in, but somehow CMS has to get their arms around how much change is occurring and how often these models are changing, because it just is not something that's sustainable when your core business is to care for patients. So we always got to remember, core business is care for patients, provide health care. And these models are so complex and changing so often that it starts to then shift where resources are being assigned away from the core model of caring for patients.
Totally agree. I would have answered it very similarly, which is change is tough. You know, we know that we want CMS to keep tweaking, but change means that somebody has to put resources towards something that potentially takes away from patient care. So that's a great wrap up. I love the different perspectives that all of you offered. Thank you so much for being on the show. So thank you for everyone, and thanks to our audience for tuning in through this episode and for listening to me and my guests over the past year and a half. You can continue to learn more about stories in value-based care when Matt Fusan takes over as the host. As always, check out the show on the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com and lend your voice to the conversation on Twitter at #VoicesInVBC. I'm Beth Houck, bringing you the voices in value-based care you should hear. Until next time, have a great week.